Hello and welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor Edit My Photo live session in our new time slot. So it's Wednesday evening in North America time, and we've got some viewers joining us in Australia and New Zealand today. So welcome Ron and our New Zealand person, Kimberly, welcome. So great to pick up some folks on the other side of the world this time. I think everybody's busy with summer and doing things on the weekend, so we've moved it to this new time slot. So if you're joining me for the first time, what we're going to do today, or what I'm going to do today, is edit some images that have been submitted by viewers and subscribers. If you want to participate in the next one, we do this every week. So next Wednesday again, there is a form in the video description right below the video if you're watching this live or watching the replay later. So I've got several images that I want to share with you today, but in particular, I've got a before and after from Anne Ambro that I want to show you because I've got some really cool things coming up. Linton also joining us from down under as well. So welcome all of our Australasia viewers today. So let me show you some exciting things today that I'm going to share in terms of how I made this image. Okay, this is Anne's image, and I believe she's here with us as well. And I want to show you what I did with it because I got a little funky. Look at that. What do you think, Anne? So I'm actually going to show you all how I did this. All right, so let's get started. All right, so I am using, let me get into my, there we go. All right, let's get into my Lightroom here. So I am using Lightroom as my main photo editor, and this is in the library module. So these are the images that we're going to be working with today. I think I've got one of yours as well, Linton, so that's great. A couple of flowers. So this one of Anne's, what I did was I took it over into Luminar. Okay, I find that abstracts and things like that work really well in Luminar because there's some things that you can do with Luminar that you can't do with Lightroom. Okay, so if I wanted to do this type of effect and you don't have Luminar, you'd have to use Photoshop. Okay, and for those of you that don't have Lightroom, you can take this directly into Luminar and do exactly what I'm going to do. So let me open this image in Luminar. And for the purpose of speed, I'm just going to work on a JPEG today. So it's going to open up Luminar, and I'm using version 1.3, which was the latest update. And I know there's some new things coming soon this summer. Everybody's anxiously waiting Bokeh AI. And I can't give away any secrets, but I can say that it's coming soon. That's the best that I can tell you. All right, so once we've got the image open inside of Luminar, the first thing that comes up is templates. Okay, so if you're opening Luminar as a plugin, you're going to see an interface that looks like this. Oh, let me just turn on my little cursor here for you so you can see what I'm doing. All right, here we go. All right, so you'll see this type of interface. You won't see catalog because that's from that your catalog is based in Lightroom, and you won't see export, you'll see apply. So the way that a plugin works, and this is true of Luminar or Topaz or even Photoshop if you're working with Lightroom and Photoshop together, is you start in Lightroom or your base program, you export it or send it to the plugin, in this case Luminar, do your editing, and then when you save it, it comes back into Lightroom as a new image. Right? So up at the top here, it gives you some suggested templates. And I played with a few of these earlier. I thought that this one looks pretty good, right? And they all do different things. So you have to decide how you want this image to look, or maybe if you're not sure, play around with a few of these options, okay? I don't see this as a black and white, but it certainly could, right? So we could go with something that's either punchier, that has more contrast or color, or you could go with something that's really soft, okay? So just taking a look at those. But what I decided to do was I have actually created a set of templates that are portrait templates, and they will be available in the Skylum Marketplace soon. Actually, Rob, if you want to share a link to our main shop on Digital Photo Mentor, as soon as those things are available, you will see them on our shop page. Okay, so you'll be able to get what I've created, right? So I'm just going to show you a few of them. So again, keep in mind that I created these for portraits, but they work well, that they apply on any image. So I created one called Golden Light, and you can see that it's really adding to the yellow effect of this flower. So I like that. I've got another one called High Key Portrait, which is light and airy. So that works for this image as well, okay? But the one that I applied on here is called Bokeh Bliss, okay? So everybody's in love with bokeh and wants to have this type of look on their image. So I've actually created an overlay, which is a texture overlay, and I've applied it to this image with this template, right? So one thing I'm going to do, first of all, is I'm actually going to crop this image a little bit. And using the composition AI tool, I want to see what Luminar suggests. I want to get rid of this thing at the top here. There's sort of this black corner there. So I definitely want to get rid of the black corner, and there's a black bit there. So I'm looking to simplify the image a little bit, but not crop it quite so much. So I want to keep a bit more of the image like so. All right, so I'm going to hit enter. Then I'm going to go in and edit the overlay. Okay, so that is in the local masking tool on the side here, and it's under texture. Okay, so once you've added a texture, it's basically any image you can add that is created as a texture. I've got different bokehs that I've been playing around with. You know, we could try a different one, right? But the one that I used in the template that I created works really well on this image. I'm just going to flip it, right? So you can flip them back and forth like this with this button. And I think that's how I want to do it. And then let's see if I flip it upside down as well. Okay, so I kind of like it that way. All right, so I'm looking at this side of the image to see which looks better to sort of cover up that corner. And I'm also looking at the rest of the image, and we can make some adjustments from there, right? One of the things that I want to do with these overlays is I've applied it with what's called a blend mode of screen, but I might decide to change the blend mode to lighten and just increase the contrast a little bit. And maybe dial it down just a little bit. So you can really change the look of the overlay depending on this blend mode that you choose, right? Let's see. Edit a screen. Screen tends to brighten a lot. Let's see if we darken that down. And I like what's happening here, but I'm actually going to mask it, okay? So these tools come with a mask built in. You can just apply it by painting it in, or I'm going to use a radial mask in this case, and I'm going to drag from the corner out. Okay, so what I'm doing is these two lines show the fade of the mask, and if I turn on the overlay, should be able to see it here. It should mask out the effect on one part of the overlay. And it is not doing that. Let me just reset this mask. There we go. I'm going to fill it. And then we're going to choose gradient mask. And we'll start again. Let's delete that guy. Not working for me. Wasn't that interesting? Let's try painting it. I don't want to reset the mask. Okay, so I'm going to paint it and erase it out of this part here, because I don't want it quite so strong over this part of the flower. So I'm just going to do a little swash in here to do an erase. Like so. All right, then what I can do is I can take this texture and edit it with another local masking tool. And in this case, I'm applying darkening, like so, just to darken this original corner a little bit. Let's undo that, so that the template, the overlay shows up a little better where the original corner was white. Okay, I got it backwards. There we go. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at the before and after. And all I've really done here is applied this template, cropped it, and manipulated the texture overlay a tiny bit. Okay, now I can go back into here and do things like punch up the contrast of the original image if I want a bit more. Okay, I can look at the curves. Rob, if you could share the video I did on curves, that would be really helpful also. Okay, so curves allows you to manipulate the contrast a little bit more precisely. Okay. And we can have something that's very abstract. Okay, so the flower itself is abstract, and now I've added this bokeh effect, which is really cool, I think, and adds to the image. We could scale it back a little bit if we don't want it quite so strong, like so. Okay. The other thing you can do when you have used a template is you can actually just scale back the entire template using this slider at the bottom. And then when you're happy with your image, you just hit that apply button inside of Luminar or whatever plugin you're using, and it will save it. You can see that it's processing. Let me pop back over here and just see if we have any questions. Okay. We got Alaska. Oops, I did forget the bumper. There's the shop. Can you adjust the opacity of the brush in AI? Yes, any of the masks that I was doing, and you can change how much you paint by the opacity of the brush. Yes, exactly. So this is just one way of processing this particular photo. Like I said, there's a number, you have to decide, and maybe you want to make a few variations, okay? So that's something else we can look at on the next image. So if we want to look at doing different versions, I'm gonna remember to share my screen before I go back here again, right? So now I've already got 3 different versions, right, of this same image. Let's get this in order here. Okay, so we got the original, the one I made earlier today, and the one that I just made. Okay, so this one is a little bit paler and softer. I added more saturation onto this one. Okay, so you get to decide how you want to process your image. I'm gonna do Linton's as well because he's here also. So I've already done a little bit of processing on this one. Let me just show you the before image. Okay, so this is the image. Actually, I'm gonna reset it. Okay, so this is the image as I received it. This is a raw file from, I believe, a Panasonic camera, if I remember correctly what he's shooting. Yes, so a Lumix. Okay, and we can look at the exposure settings. So ISO 200, 177 mil lens, f10, and 1/15 of a second. So I'm assuming that you're using a tripod here, Linton, because otherwise a 1/15 of a second probably isn't going to give you a sharp image. So I'm guessing a tripod, and f10 to get a bit of depth of field on the flower. Right. So a couple of things that struck me right away. Okay, so the question I get a lot is, how do I decide what to do to an image, right? So I could decide that this one is too light and I want to darken it. I want to bring the detail of the background, or I could decide that I want to make it light and airy. So for me, flowers are generally something that's softer. So I went with the softer look that you saw me have a moment ago. I'll just go back here. Okay, so that's kind of what I ended up with, all right? So let me show you how I got there. So the first thing that I did was I looked at the camera profile, and I've talked about this before, right? So depending on what camera you use, you find this up here in Lightroom. Click on these little 4 squares, and if you don't see camera matching, there's all of these different ones that are available here. You'll generally see the Adobe ones and some of these others. Okay? If your camera matching one is not showing, you may have to go and install the profiles for your camera. But it does recognize the ones for Linton's camera. Okay, so this is the one that came out of the camera. Just by hovering my mouse over it, you can see that natural, okay, portrait changes the color a little bit. Scenery or vivid. Okay, so vivid really punches up the colors and the contrast. Okay, I kind of like scenery in this case because it's giving me a bit more colors, but it's also softening the background in a way. So let's just go with that one. Often when you change this profile, you find that it makes a world of difference in the beginning. Right, so I could lower the highlights and bring the detail out of that background if I want to, but I think then what happens is it becomes too busy. So the idea with bringing out the subject in the image is there are 4 things that will attract your eye, okay? And if those things are in the background, Rob, if you could please share how to improve your background article. If those things are in the background, they will draw attention away from the subject, okay? And they are contrast, bright color, areas of brightness, and sharpness, okay? So when we look at this image, the flower has the most color, the flower has the most contrast, it's also the darkest thing, okay? It's the sharpest, so it's already got a lot going for it, and the background is already disappearing. So we're actually going to go with what's there and enhance that. So the next thing I want to do is crop it. So I'm using a lot of keyboard shortcuts. If you could please share the article for keyboard shortcuts in Lightroom, please, Rob. I keep him on his toes, hopping, because he never knows what I'm going to say. So this one, I want to actually rotate a little bit because I want to get rid of some of this leaf on the left, right? And I want to make it so that the flower is not perfectly straight up and down. I want more of a diagonal. So I'm going to go about like that. And that also puts the flower a bit more off center, okay? So my keyboard shortcut I was using there is R for the crop tool. The next thing I did was I actually applied one of my presets. You can share those as well, Rob. So these are a set of Lightroom presets that I've created, and I have a set of vignettes so you can darken the edges, or you can use a vignette to lighten the edges. So I'm going to use the one called Strong, and what it's doing is it's in the effects panel and it's lightening the edges. So normally when you make a vignette, you take it to the left or you darken, but this case I'm taking it to the right and lightening. Okay, all I'm going to do here is maybe make it slightly larger so that it's not overlapping the flower quite so much, like so. All right, there's a little toggle here that I can turn the vignette on and off, and you can see what it's doing, and I think it's doing a really nice job. Right, going back to the basic panel, right, I almost never use the saturation and vibrant sliders, and I'll show you why in a moment. Right, if I do increase the blacks, I'm holding the Alt Option key and it shows me anything that's clipping. So if I take the blacks to the left until I get some clipping areas showing up, that means black with no detail. You can see it's hitting the left side of the histogram up here. Right? Watch what happens to the contrast and the color. Right? So the original, let me do the before and after again. Okay, so that's the before and after. So just by adding blacks to your image, you'll often get the color. It brings out a lot more of that color. So do your black and white adjustments, and by that I mean the black slider and the white slider. Do those first, right? I might actually even increase the whites, and let's push that background almost to pure white. Do those first, and then go and adjust your saturation, right? I'm going to increase the blacks a little bit so it's not quite so contrasty. Now, if I wanted a little more of that background to disappear, I can lower the clarity in the texture and blur it out, but I don't want to do the entire image, okay? I just want to do that on the background, or conversely, sharpen the flower more, okay? And in order to do that, you need to do what's called a local adjustment. So everything that we do in the basic panel or any of these panels here are what are called global adjustments. They apply to the whole image. And the local adjustments are these ones at the top here, okay? And you can get to those from the Tools menu or the keyboard shortcuts, or just by clicking them, right? So I use keyboard shortcut Shift M, and that will open up the the radial filter. Okay, so that's one where I'm going to draw a circle. So it gives me this little, see this little crosshairs there. So when I click and drag, I can make an oval if I stretch it, or I can make a circle. So I want to make something that's approximately the shape and size of the flower. I can then rotate it, right? Then I'm just going to reset. So double click the word effect, and I'm going to add texture and clarity. Now, if you're not sure if it's applying to the inside or the outside of the circle, it defaults to the inside. Right? Click O on your keyboard, which stands for overlay. And now you can see wherever you see green on my screen, this green overlay is where this tool is applying. Okay? So you can see that it's affecting the flower. I might scale it back just a little bit. And it's giving it some texture. Okay? Now, if I don't want it on this leaf down here, I can either move this circle a little bit, or I can use the brush that comes with this and just erase it from that part. Okay, so maybe I want to have the leaf not quite as sharp, right? Like so, especially that edge right here. Then we can actually add a second one, and if I want to do a similar one but invert it, I can just right click it, duplicate it. Okay, so now it's, you see that it enhanced it twice. Then I'm just going to move it over so you can see that there's two different ones. And I'm going to reset it and invert it. So now the effects are going to apply on the outside of the circle. Okay. And I'm actually going to take it farther, and I'm going to lower the texture and clarity. I'm going to lower the sharpness, and I'm actually going to push the highlights up and the whites up. Okay. So what that's doing, you see how it's taking that edge vignette even farther. Okay. And then I can just play with it until I get it where I want it. Okay, maybe a little bit bigger. I need a little bigger circle. And now you can see, click O. Okay, so it's applying to the outside part, right? And I'm going to feather it a little bit less. Okay, so let's see what these are doing. So if I toggle this on and off, it's going to toggle off both of the filters that I applied, the radial filters. Okay, so now we can see what it's doing overall. And I think I'm going too far with the whites, so I'm just going to scale it back a tiny bit. Like so. Okay. Now if I want to further go in and play with some of the colors, I can go to the HSL panel. I can also adjust the main color of the image with the sliders up top here. So if I decide I want it to be a little bit warmer, okay, I'm going to keep it at what it's shot at. Maybe a little bit less pink, okay? But if I want to play with just the green, I want to go down to the HSL or color panel. Okay, so let's say I want more focus on the flower and less on the leaves. Okay, so HSL stands for hue, saturation, and luminance or lightness. So I want to lower the saturation of these leaves. So there's a little tool that's a trick in here. Okay, so whenever you see these little circles, okay, by hovering over it, okay, you can see that it says adjust saturation by dragging in the photo. So this is what's called a targeted adjustment tool. So if I click on it, you get something that looks like this. It's a little crosshairs with an up and down circle with up and down arrows. So wherever I place this little thing, if I click and drag it up and down, watch my sliders over on the side there. Okay, so you see the saturation sliders are moving, but it's green and yellow. Okay, so often when you have foliage or grass, you'll find that the colors you want to affect are not just green, but yellow as well. Okay, so I can do the same under luminance, and this works really quickly to affect the colors you want to darken those leaves. Okay, but we don't want to necessarily darken them. What if we want to lighten them? Okay, so either way, drag up for lighten, drag down for darken. We can even affect the hue. Okay, by affecting the hue, it's going to change the tint of the leaves. We can make them more blue, or we can make them more yellow. We can also affect the tint of the flower. Okay, so I could affect that. Let's grab a different spot. Let's try this spot right here. Okay, so it's changing the magenta tones. So if I want more pure magenta, I can do that. I can also affect the saturation of just the flower. Okay, so these are great tools to use if you want to add some punch on certain areas of your image. So these are still technically global edits because it's applying everywhere. Okay, if there was another flower, it would be affected as well. Okay? but they're only affecting them per color. All right. Looks good. So I'm just going to hit escape. Okay, so let's look at the before image. There we go. And after. Okay, so I've punched up the contrast in the flower and the saturation, and it's made something very different. But let's say I want to make this into a black and white, okay? I don't want to have to undo everything and start over again because I like what I've done here. But let's just make what's called a virtual copy. Okay, there is a keyboard shortcut for that, and that is Command apostrophe if you're following along. Or you can just right click on the image, and down about 2/3 of the way on this list here is create virtual copy. So now what happens is it makes a new thumbnail. So Lightroom just makes another image inside of Lightroom itself. It has not copied the raw file. If we look at the hard drive, there's still only one version of this file. But now we have a second copy, and it's called a virtual copy because it doesn't exist anywhere else except inside of Lightroom, okay? Now we can do something different with this one. So I like what we've done, but I want to turn it into black and white. Okay, so I'm going to go black and white. And you'll notice that it changed the profile to Adobe Monochrome, which is fine. And I want to make sure that under the black and white panel that these sliders are still available. Okay, because if you go with a camera monochromatic profile like this one, for example, often when you get down to this panel, you'll see it's grayed out. Okay, so what that means, and I'm just going to make another virtual copy, okay, what that means is that camera profile doesn't have any color information. Okay, so you can't adjust it any further than that. So I'm going to use Adobe Monochrome. And then I'm going to go to, oops, there we go. Let me undo that. Let's go to this one instead. Okay, we're on camera monochrome. I'm going to make my virtual copy. We'll go back over here. All right, so now we're going to change it to Adobe Monochrome. And we should get our black and white panel back. There we go. My Lightroom is operating a little slow today. Okay, so now you can already see that just by changing it from the camera black and white profile to the Adobe black and white, there's a difference. Okay, waiting for my Lightroom to catch up. Okay, so see the difference? There's a lot more contrast in the Adobe monochrome one, but because I still have the color information there, I can work with it a lot better. Okay, so in this panel here, and I like to have the original available so that I can see the color. I'll show you that on another image, because there's one that was also converted to black and white, right? I know that this is magenta because that's the slider it was affecting before. So I know I can affect the brightness of the flower with these sliders. I know that I can work on the leaves and the background with the green and the yellow. Okay? So you can decide how you want this to go. So if I want that background and the leaves to be brighter, we can work with that like so. Okay, so it provides a lot more information and flexibility. There's probably some blue in this flower as well. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there's usually not just one color, but having this black and white mix allows you to adjust the colors from the original base image. Okay, so when you shoot in camera, if you are shooting raw like Linton did here, you have all the color information available, even if you shoot in a monochrome profile like the camera monochrome one for his camera. Okay, and I actually have one to show you on that. So let me pop back over here and see how we did. All right, any questions? Let me come over here to my question panel. Okay. Vivian's here. Oh, I have one of yours as well, Vivian. Awesome. Rob is reminding us to please give this video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that you get notices, especially with our new time slot. All right. So Linton says, yes, he did indeed use a tripod. Love that little tool. Which one is that you're referring to, Kelly? Is that the radial filter? Because I use the radial filters a lot, right? Yes, you can also use the HSL sliders, and as mentioned, when you're working with black and white, okay? But be careful not to turn it to monochrome because they won't work either, okay? So Linton says he had darkened the background, but the lighter background is really good, gives a different feel. Yeah, totally different, right, Linton? So this one, for me, because the background was already really bright, by trying to bring the tones down, they became more similar to the flower. So remember what I said about things standing out. Contrast is what's going to grab your eye. So when there's contrast between the flower, the subject, and the background, it actually works well either if they're opposite, right? So either the subject is brighter and the background is darker, or the subject is darker and the background is brighter, okay? So this would be what would be called more like a high key image, okay? The Adobe Color Panel Profile. Yes, Kelly, that's an awesome tool. I find that a lot of people aren't aware that it's there, and it exists inside of Luminar as well if you're using it as the standalone. So I've got another image. Now Vivian is here, so I'm going to try and do as many images from people that are here so that you can see them live and ask any questions. All right, so I've got one from Danette that I want to cover also. Okay, so this is an image of Vivian's. And if you want to tell us even a little bit about it, where you took it, if you know this fellow, or if it's just a candid street photo. So I want to show you the before image. So that's what it looked like in terms of the raw file. So shot with an Olympus camera. Okay. So what I did with this one was I warmed it up and I did lots of adjustments to basically darken everything around him so that he would really stand out. Okay. Tell me in the chat, Vivian, what program you're using to do your editing, because if you are using, for example, Luminar, I will actually hop over and do this one in Luminar for you. I did all these edits in Lightroom, but I'd be happy to demonstrate which program you are using, right, if you're using the other one. So let me just show you. I'm going to undo a few of these steps here. So what I did was I've got the radial filter again. So I applied a radial filter to the outside around him, okay? And I'm actually going to just sort of erase it from him to make sure he's not getting it on him. Okay. Keep my overlay on. Okay, so where the green shows is where this radial filter is applying. Okay, and I'll show you everything that's been applying in this filter. So I've got it really soft, meaning that the edges are soft so you don't see it. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I've got minus exposure. It's about minus 0.6. I've got minus highlights. Okay, and I could probably take a few other things as well, but let's see what it's doing. Turn the overlay off, toggle it off. Okay, so that's what this filter is doing. Okay, so it's really kind of minimizing a lot of the busyness of the background and focusing on him, okay, darkening these edges. And then I did a second one over here on his shoe, okay, because his shoe was really bright, and all I did here was lower the exposure a little bit and the highlights, okay. Now I'll show you how to do a quick luminosity mask on a radial filter. Okay, so if I lower the exposure quite a bit, it's going to affect this whole area that I made the circle on. But if you go down to the bottom of the tool, you'll see what's called range mask. Change it to luminance, okay? And then check this little box to show the mask. And where you see red is what you were seeing in green before, is where it's applying. And then you have this range slider, okay? And this is like, it matches the histogram. So the left is dark and the right is white, okay? Or it matches the like levels if you're used to levels. So I actually want to only apply it on the brighter areas, specifically that bottom part of his shoe, right? So notice as I slide the left one to the right, it is then masking it off the dark areas, okay? And if I turn this mask a bit, okay, again, I'm going to turn the radial filters off and on. So watch his shoe this time. Okay, so see how that's really affecting that shoe, okay? Because the eye goes to bright areas, right? So remember we were talking about my notifications. All right, let's look at the image upside down, okay? It's because, oops, wrong button. Let's look at the image upside down. Okay, so the article that I mentioned earlier, which was watching your background, okay? So there's the image, the way I have it currently. If we look at the before image, okay, look at where your eye goes here. Okay, your eye goes to the background. There's a lot of busyness with the bars here because there's dark light, so that's that contrast where your eye goes. Okay, and even once we darken all that, then it goes to his shoe. Okay, so by doing all those adjustments, I also straightened it with cropping. Right, so I just did a quick crop to straighten it. Put them right back side up. Okay, so you can see what I've done here, the original. So how I cropped it was I actually did that under the transform panel. Okay, so I used auto. Okay, I'm gonna undo it or turn it off. And you can see how crooked it was. Okay, so you can use a couple of different things to straighten your images. So I could try the crop tool and the auto, which I did. Okay, so it did a pretty good job, right? You can see that it's attempting to crop, but there's also some perspective distortion, right? You can see that we're looking down a little bit, so things are narrowing at the bottom of the image. So the rotate here or the crop isn't going to do the trick. So that's why I decided to go down to the transform panel, and I just hit auto, and that's what I got. So made a lot of difference. Okay, so just straighten things out. Then the other thing that I applied, another local adjustment, was a gradient filter. So that's the ones that come from the top or the bottom, right? It comes from the edge. So I applied one to the top of the image. Oops, you can see I missed his shirt here. And then I masked it so that it didn't apply on him. Okay, you can see that I missed a couple of spots, so I'm just going to clean that up. And what this one is doing is it's applying negative sharpness by -70, -77 texture, -61 highlights, and a little bit minus on the exposure. Okay, so if I turn this one off, let me show you what it's doing. Okay, so it's kind of replicating blurring that background and bringing him out. Now I also have one on this corner to darken the edges over here, and one over here. Okay, so when I turn it off and on, you can see that it's really focusing attention into him. Okay, so again, before and after, right? So ideally, I mean, I would love to have less of the black bars behind him, but that's where he was sitting, so we got to work with what we got, right? Okay, so Vivian says she's got Luminar on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this one. Oops. I have to get over to Lightroom first. I'm going to make a copy, and I'm going to reset it. And then we're going to hop over to Luminar and see if we can do the same thing. So let's do a comparison between Luminar and Lightroom. Okay, so you can see, you know, what I did in Lightroom was I corrected some tilts. Again, I'm just going to do a JPEG just for speed. I corrected some tilts. I warmed it up a little bit. The color balance, warmed it up a little bit. I did some local adjustments to bring the focus and darken the background, bring the focus into him more. All right. So did he know you were taking his photo, Vivian? And did you show it to him? So let me know in the chat, those of you that enjoy doing street photography, that's something that I love as well. When you take a photo of somebody, do you share it, right? Are you doing covert street photography, or are you doing more conspicuous, where you actually talk to your subjects and engage with them, right? It looks like he's just having a relaxing day on the bench there. All right, waiting for Luminar to open. let me just hop back over here. All right, okay. Turn my facing camera off, he says. Okay. Can do, Rob, can do. And we're going to do the intro bumper because I missed that. So if you're not sure what channel you're watching, you're here on Digital Photo Mentor. All right. I've got Luminar opened over here. It opened on my other screen, so I just got to pop it over here. All right. Okay, so we could start with a template, or we could attempt to do the same kinds of things that I did earlier. So I'm actually going to start with a template. So again, this is one that I made. It's called Low Key Portrait. So the one that I did with Linton's image, we went high key, or all sort of light tones. This one I see more as dark tones. He's got dark clothing, right? So that's actually kind of cool. It lowers the color saturation as well. I'm going to try another one, which I created called Hollywood Heyday. And that one is black and white. I love street photography in black and white. And that's a really cool way to go as well, right? So let's go. Actually, there's another one that might work. So Ghoulish Grinch, Ghoulish Grunge, not the Grinch. Maybe I should call it the Grinch. He kind of looks like he's got the Grinch on his shirt here. Okay, so this one adds kind of a neat color effect in a bluish tone, which works really well for street photography sometimes. I think probably the best one is the Low Key Portrait. So we're going to go with that one. And then once you choose a template, you can then go and edit it. Okay, so the first option you have, remember, is these sliders. You can just dial them down to lower the overall effect of this template. Okay, so as I dial it down, it comes back to the original image. Okay, so I like the overall effect, but I'm going to come in here. Okay, so let's see if we've removed some saturation. Oh, I know where it is here. Okay, so dramatic. This was one of the tools that I've applied. And I've lowered some saturation here, I believe. So let's check what that one is doing. And some of my templates come with a mask already on them. So if I've masked it, I can unmask it. Okay, it's not doing quite so much with the color as I expected. So yeah, I'm losing some color up here, I think. Okay, so I'm going to reset saturation to 0. And I think I've reset some of the saturations in here. All right, so what I've done is I've lowered saturation on a lot of the colors other than yellow, orange, and red. And I did that because those are the colors that are most often in skin tone, okay? If I want to lower yellow, you'll see that it's really affecting that background. So I might actually do that. But if I change orange, you'll see that it's going to affect his face for the most part, okay? So I'm going to give him a bit more color. And I'm going to lower this yellow a little bit. And that's fixing the background. Now, watch what happens when I do red, okay? It is affecting the brick in the background, but it's also affecting his arms and his shoe and the little thing on his shirt. So be very careful when you're using these that you don't want to go too far. But the beautiful thing about doing the HSL sliders, these are the same ones we used in Lightroom, is I can mask them in Luminar. I can't mask them in Lightroom, right? So I'm actually going to do that, right? Let's just see, because I don't want this to apply to him, right? Because I don't want to mask, I don't want to get the red out of his arm and his shoe. I want to leave that, right? Let's see how that is. Okay, that's better. All right, so now we're affecting the background mostly. Let's fix that tilt. So that's the composition. Okay, so let's see how it does with the perspective. So I can just click the one that fixes the crookedness, and let's see if it does that. Yes, and let's see if it corrects perspective. Give it a second, it's thinking. Okay, if it's not working as well as I want, I can, oh, there we go. All right, now I'm going to go back and do the tilt again. So once it corrected perspective, we're now tilted again. So let's go back here. Takes a moment to apply. I can also do that manually as well. Okay, so I can just grab it. And I'm looking at the lines of the bars. So where I'm looking is once you click on the corner to drag it, you'll see this grid grid show up. And where I'm looking is I'm looking to see that the grid matches on all of the bars. Okay, so not just the middle ones, but the edge ones also. So about like that. Okay, I want to make sure I get most of him. Make sure he's got space in front of him, more space than behind him. Okay. And hit enter. Okay, so fairly quickly we've got something really similar to what I had in Lightroom, and I can go ahead and darken some of the background as well. Now what I want to do is, if I want to just affect the stuff behind him, okay, and I want to mask in brightness, I'm going to go over to this local masking tool that I used before and add a basic adjustment, and I'm going to lower the highlights. And I'm going to bring the structure down. So structure is that blurry. Okay, so what we had in Lightroom, which was lowering the texture and the clarity. Same kind of idea here with structure. Okay. Maybe not so much contrast. Okay. Then I'm just going to erase it off of him again. Okay, so make sure I have a nice big brush. But I don't want it really on the bench either so much, okay? So I want to make sure that I'm erasing. Right, so as soon as I click on here, it's going to show me the mask. Get my mask to show up here. Come on, there we go. Okay, so I want to erase all the red bits from him. And probably most of the bench, because the bench that he's sitting on would be sharp as well. Okay, now the tricky part is that fence that's behind him, because it's going to be tricky to separate each of the bars. Okay, so I might just have to let that one go, and one more around his head. Make sure I get all of him, like so. And we're getting close. Okay, so remember the question that I had earlier was, can I adjust the opacity of the brush? So that's what I just did. So I was painting with a lower opacity, and I changed it to higher because I want to make sure that he's 100% sharp. Right? So the opacity slider right here, okay, is how you adjust the mask. Okay, now you can see what it's doing, and I can just say, okay, I've gone too far. I can dial it back a little bit. Okay, and it's really sort of affecting that background more than it's affecting him. Okay. Another thing that I love inside of Luminar that I use a lot, especially for street photos, I'm actually going to remove the mystical here because I don't want him to be so blurry. I want him to be sharp. That's one of my favorite filters, but street photography, maybe not so much. Okay? I want to add a mood or a LUT. So this is one I use a lot, and I've got a few favorites. There's a lot built in with Luminar, but you can even purchase extras. Some of the ones I like for street photography, I like this wooden one a lot. So you can see that it's sort of giving a almost a sepia tone look. Tritone, smoky. Smoky looks good as well, and I like Manhattan a lot too. Right, so Manhattan, street photography. I'm gonna go with this wooden one, and you can change sort of the amount, the saturation of the LUT itself, right, and the contrast. But I sort of like what it's doing there, right? Right, let's take a look at the before and the after, right? I'm pretty happy with that. You know, I could go a little farther and I could probably do some dodging and burning, right? In terms of getting these spots in the background darker. So just keep in mind, if you're dodging and burning, make sure that you keep your strength under about 15, okay? And I'm literally just gonna go in here and sort of do a swipe on each little stripe here. It's probably gonna take a while to catch up with me. And I want to darken this building, this little block area over here. Okay, so you can see it catching up slowly. Get this area. And the reason that I'm using this lowered opacity is because I don't want to do a big blob and have to go back and undo. I just want to do it little by little. Okay, so be patient. Do, you know, a couple of strokes at a time and then just let it catch up. Okay. Like so. And then I might do this whole sort of sweep over here, trying to get these little holes, sweep over here. So the idea again is, remember, we're trying to get the attention on our fellow here and not on the background, right? So I'm trying to minimize those things which are distracting, and those are the bright bits. So I still find his shoe somewhat distracting. Right? Oh, we didn't do the shoe in Luminar. That's why his shoe is distracting. So I'm just going to keep going on the shoe. That looks pretty good. Let's check our vignette. Okay, so most of my templates that I create do have a vignette. So we want to check it by dialing the feather down to 0. And now we can see where it's placed. Okay, I'm going to just offset it a little bit more this way, like that, and then put the feather back up. Okay, so let's say apply, and it will come back into Lightroom in a moment. So let me come back over here, see how we're doing. How's everybody doing? Awesome. Vivian shared the photo. You didn't share it with him, but he agreed to have it taken. Excellent. Do please remember to submit your photos. I've actually got a nice collection for the next few weeks, but keep submitting your photos. I know a lot of you are regulars. I have a couple of Nigels as well. Once I get through some of the ones I have, I still need more. So keep sending more. And if I haven't done one of your older ones, it probably just means I haven't selected that particular one to do. I look for images that will make a nice demonstration that I can show a particular technique on of some kind. Cody from Hawaii, aloha. Absolutely, welcome. Hey. Kelly's doing light painting Saturday night. Excellent. I would love to edit some light painting photos. If you're doing them as a single shot, Kelly, you can upload up to 2. And if you want to send more than that, just get a hold of me through the contact form on the website. If you could send a link to that, please, Rob. I will make a special Google form or a special Google folder where you can actually drop a whole set in. So if you do a series of light painted images and you want them put together as one image, I would do that in Photoshop. I would probably need multiples or all the ones you shoot. Make sure that you have the tripod on the camera on a tripod and that it stays stationary if you want to stack your images. All right, and that your focus is consistent. So if you want to do that, Kelly, I would love to put together a light painting montage together, or put them as a stacked images and show you how to do that. All right, if you just have a single one or two, I can work on those as well. Remember, raw files are the best to go. All right, we're back over here in Lightroom with our image. So now let's just compare what I did here with what I did in Lightroom. Right? I think they're both good, just very different. The one on the left, the Lightroom one, is actually quite a bit flatter. I like the Luminar one better. I really do. I like his positioning. I think we did a better crop. The background is more minimized. And I like just that little hint of red showing up on his shoe and his shirt. So I like the Luminar edit there. And it looks like we've cropped out some of the trees in the process also, which really didn't add to the story. So there you go. So it pays to process your images a couple of different ways if you're not sure where to go with it. All right, now I've got a couple of different images here. This one is actually going to be fairly quick. We've done some abstracts already, and I wanted to show a landscape and an animal, okay? So this one, I did a bit of editing already in Lightroom. So let me show you the before. Okay, so the only thing with this one, perfect exposure, looks like great composition, just a little bit on the flat side, right? So I'm gonna undo this one and start over because I haven't really done a lot to this one. You'll be surprised, right? So if I reset it, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm gonna do that camera. So this is an image submitted by, I apologize if I'm murdering your pronunciation of your name. Please let me know how to pronounce it. Kai Vu, and I'm guessing this is the terraces, rice terraces in either China or Vietnam. It looks like Sapa, where I visited. So this one also comes with camera matching. So it recognizes the camera, and in this case, it's a Nikon file, so an NEF. And it is, let's see what kind of camera. Okay, so this is the benefit of having the raw files because I have the metadata. Okay, so all the information of how it was shot, what camera, what lens, everything, okay, is in here. So D750 was the camera. First thing I'm going to do is that camera profile, right? So it came with the standard, okay, so camera standard. If I change to landscape, look what happens. It automatically gets more color. Okay, if we go to vivid, same thing. So in landscape, I'm going to go with that one because it tends to punch up the greens and yellows a bit more, which is what we're looking for here, right? So look at the histogram. So the histogram could tell you a lot about the exposure of the image, but also the contrast. So what it can tell me here, okay, if I turn on my clipping warnings, right, that's the J keyboard shortcut, there's nothing clipping in here, okay? So that means there's nothing of pure black and nothing of pure white, okay? My little shortcut to get the graph to stretch out, right? We could do it with contrast, but watch the graph here as I grab this contrast slider, okay? It spreads out evenly, okay? So that actually looks really good on the screen, but take a look what it's done is it's stretched out further towards the black than the white. It's still not touching the white, okay? So contrast is good, and we might come back to that one, okay? But we want to adjust it so that it's touching both edges of the graph. So the quick way to do that is to hold the Shift key and double click the word whites and then the word blacks. Okay, now I'm going to take it a step farther and I'm going to darken this whole image a little bit because now you can see that the histogram is spread out, but it's a little towards the right, which is bright. So I want to lower it just a little bit because I'm really going to focus attention on this paw of land here with these buildings, all right? Because that's where the light is hitting. All right, so now I'm going to go Alt Option key plus black. Now you can see there's a little bit of black clipping in the lower left corner, but I'm going to do a little bit more, okay? So I want more blacks clipping. Now remember what I said before, when you increase the blacks, what do you expect is going to happen with the color saturation? Okay, let me do that again without holding the Alt key. Okay, so we're at minus 46 on the blacks. Okay, if I undo it, watch the color. Watch the color come in as I increase the blacks. Okay, so just by increasing the blacks, you get a lot of that. Okay, you can also use the dehaze slider, and that will do a lot of similar things. Okay, but I just like to use the black and white sliders because I have more control over which end I'm putting it on. Okay, now I'm going to punch up that contrast because it did a really nice thing, and I can do that with contrast, or I can do it with the tone curve. Okay. Now I think Rob has already shared this link to this one. If you haven't already shared a link to the curves article and video, you can do that now, please. Okay, so making what's called an S curve. Okay, so you can see the histogram actually in the background here. Okay, so I can see that if I push this up, okay, that's the highlights, right? So the right hand side of this line is the highlights, and the right hand side is the shadows. Okay. Now look at that. All right. I can even push it in from this side, which will bring my whites up, just as if I was moving the white slider. Same idea. So let's take a look at a quick before. Okay, look how flat and sort of lackluster, lacking color it is. Now we got lots of punch, all right? Let's look at the white balance. I'm gonna give it a little bit more yellow because I really want those golds to come out, and a little bit less magenta. And I'm gonna go to the HSL panel. We talked about shifting colors, okay? I wanna shift these greens so that they're not sort of these neon looking greens. I'm gonna shift it, so I'm clicking and dragging down. So notice as I go down, now it looks like fall, right? If I go up, it's sort of blue, right? So I wanna go, let me just double click this to reset. I want to go a little bit to the side, but not too much, okay? So I just want to get a little bit more yellow into these greens, so it has a gold look, okay, as opposed to blue, right? Now I want to add a vignette, and I'm going to do that under the effects panel, okay? So what I recommend is lower the slider to the left really far, then turn feather to 0. Now you can see where the vignette is going. So unlike Luminar, you don't get to place it, okay? So you can't change where it is. It's always centered, okay? But you can change the shape of it, and you could change the size, okay? But you can't change the position inside of Lightroom. If you need it positioned off center, then you need to use a radial filter like I did before. Okay? Then I'm gonna put the feather back up and change the amount, right? Now this one I'm using the highlight priority. I think I'm going to change it to color priority. Actually, let's go back here again. If you increase this slider at the bottom, this highlights one, it basically takes the vignette off of highlight areas, okay? So it makes it look a little bit more realistic, because if you have something that looks like that, it's not realistic, right? So let's come back a little bit. Let's change it to color priority and see if that looks better. I think it does. All right, so we want to keep it nice and soft, like so. Okay, so if I turn that off, you'll see what it's doing. Oops, I'm hitting the wrong thing. Okay, see what that vignette is doing is it's bringing the eye in to that middle part, right? Now I'm going to do one off center using the radial filter. So Shift M, and I'm going to put it here because I want to really highlight sort of these farm areas, okay? And I'm going to invert it so that the stuff on the outside is darkened. So we could do this two ways. I could highlight this area by lightening it and leaving the rest dark, or I could darken the outside. So that's what I've done, is I've brought the highlights down on the outside, right? So now you can see that it's really bringing your attention to this particular area, right? Let's do a before and after here without all the distractions. So if you want to see your image like this, just hit L on the keyboard. It stands for lights out, and it helps you to see the image without the distractions of all the Lightroom stuff. Okay, so before, after. Okay, there's a couple of other things that sort of bother me here. And one of them, again, this is about checking the edges of your image. Okay, so always look at the edges. So I'm going to zoom in here. This little yellow dot at the top here bugs me. This blue or green tarp or whatever it is bugs me. So I'm going to clone them out. Okay, so the clone tool is this one right here. Make sure that you're using heal. Okay, so clone, the difference between clone and heal. I'm going to do this at 100% just to show you what it looks like. Okay, so if I clone, right, it is a literal copy of whatever is in the source circle over to the target circle. Okay, can you see that? So if I change the source circle, it changes what goes in the end. But if we do heal, okay, it tries to blend the target circle and make it match. Okay, so we don't want to do that here, but we do want to do that up at the top here. I'm just going to make my circle smaller. Okay, so I'm just going to paint over. So when you're doing the clone and healing, you can do a dot, which just makes a circle, or you can draw. Okay, I'm just going to click on that, and let's just see if what it does. Okay, so that's helping already. There's still one more spot I want to get rid of here. Okay, so Lightroom chooses where it's picking from, and you can move the source around like this. I'm just grabbing it so that it matches better. So it looks like it's the side of the hill, right? So I want to make sure that it fits like so. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. Okay, the blue tarp over here doesn't bother me so much because I'm drawing the attention there. Right. These guys here bug me a little bit because it doesn't match the rest of the foreground. So what I can do, there's a couple of options, okay? So I'm just gonna draw a huge thing over it like this. And Lightroom is not the best tool for doing major cloning and healing, right? But I'm gonna see how it does here, okay? So I don't wanna replace it entirely. So I'm gonna turn down the opacity of this tool. Right, just to pick up more of that green over top of the sticks. There, how's that? Okay, now it looks like it blends a little bit better. Okay, see that? Awesome. That looks good. Okay. Now if I want to move in, so I'm zoomed in, and if I want to move around the image, if I just click when my tool is active, I'm going to draw a line to clone. But if you want to get the hand, you can see the little hand. Okay, I'm hitting the space bar and holding it, and then I can move around in the image, right? This stick over here also bugs me. So I am going to, let's turn my feather up a little bit. And I'm just gonna turn my green cursor off. Okay, so now I'm gonna make my brush just a little bigger, I don't know if you can see it, than this thing here. So I'm gonna attempt to clone this thing out. Again, like I said, Lightroom doesn't do the best job ever at cloning and healing. Making sure I'm at 100%. So if it doesn't do a great job, I might have to hop over to Photoshop if I wanted to do a perfect job of this. Okay. No, it's not doing a great job at all, as suspected. Okay, so I'm not going to do this one, right? If I want to erase it, I could go over to Luminar, and their erase tool does a really nice job as well. Okay, now this little spot up at the corner here, I'm going to darken this one, and I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the grass. I'm just going to heal it at a slightly lower opacity. Okay, it looks like I need to get my brush matching. There we go. That looks better. How's that? Just to get rid of that yellow spot up at the top. Okay, those are the kinds of little things that make a difference, that really are going to draw your eye into the middle. Right. Something else I could do is I could add another radial filter and just actually blur the overall edges of the picture a little bit. Okay, so let's make sure it's on the outside. Okay, I'm going to go to an extreme here so you can see what it's doing. Okay, so now see it's softened these edges. Okay, a little too much, obviously, but I want to soften the foreground and this tree over here. Okay, but not so much. Okay, what I recommend doing is when you're editing things like this and you want to see what it's going to do, take it to extremes like I just did. Right, take it to the extreme because you can always dial it back. You want to see what it's doing and then take it up. Okay? Perfect. So let's see the before and after. Lovely. That's a beautiful image. I wish that I was there right now. Okay, rice terraces. Okay, how are we doing for questions? Let's see. Different kind of stacking, Anne said focus stacking. So focus stacking is different. That's more for macro. But when you're doing light painted images, it's more of a layer stacking and blending. Okay, different altogether. Let me get onto camera here. There you guys are. All right, let's see. What else did I miss? Curves. How's our new time slot? Excellent. All right. So I've got probably a couple more that I can do today. I really want to do this elephant. So let me get back to the elephant over here in Lightroom. And I might do him, I'm going to save these ones for next week. Okay. Actually, I could probably do this one really quickly. This is an image by Rajendra, and it's a JPEG. And I wanted to show this one because the challenge with editing a JPEG when you have color like this that is incorrect. Okay, so it was shot obviously with a white balance that was not right. Looks very orange. Okay, when you have a JPEG, you don't have all the options that you have with a raw file. So when I pull down this white balance, you'll see as shot, auto, and custom. Okay, but if we're looking at a raw file, I'm just going to hop over one here. Okay, so this is a raw file. For example, you have different options. Okay, so all of the options for the white balance presets that you have on your camera are available for you when you have a raw file, but not when you have a JPEG. So when you shoot something that is extremely off color like this, right, I recommend trying the auto white balance first. Okay, so it's tried to correct it. It's not doing such a great job. Then you might try something artistic. Okay, so the things with white balance that's really off like this is it's almost impossible to get it perfect, right, when you've shot a JPEG so far out. So that's not bad. Okay, we're getting closer. Let's maybe try some of these vintage ones or something that's faded out. Okay, yeah, we're getting closer, but I'm still sort of not seeing anything I like. The color is just weird. Okay, so what I would probably do with this one, honestly, is either turn it into a black and white or do something really funky with it in Lightroom, like a cross-processed or something. Okay, I would also probably crop this one so that where she, excuse me, she's looking to the right in this picture. So I want to give her a bit more space in that direction. So I'm going to crop it in. I'm going to still give her the space up top, but just make sure that she has a bit more space to her, to behind her in this case. I want to keep the head space, right? Like so. Let's add a dark vignette. Okay, these are in my presets. Like that. And then I'm just going to do my shift double click. Okay, so you can see that it's quite overexposed, or it's trying to, aha, she's got like little mirrored beads, so it's trying to get them to not be overexposed, so that's fine. We're gonna do that. Punch her up a little bit. All right, so now we're getting closer. The other issue is it's a slightly out of focus. Let's look at the exposure. So f2.2, 80th of a second. So it should be okay for shutter speed. The concern I think here is that the focus was just missed. I'm going to zoom into 100%. So when you're dealing with an aperture like f2.2 or this lens is a 1.4, see where the focus is. Let me turn my green cursor on again. The focus is on her dress here, not on her face. So you can see that this part of the dress is sharp, okay? And that's how I can tell that it's not camera shake, that it was just a missed focus. So there is sharpness there. And then if I go up towards her face, you can see that her face is blurry, but this back earring is sharper, and her necklace and things that are behind her face, so distance to the camera, this back shoulder looks sharp and her face is not. So you really want to make sure that you get your focal dots when you're doing your autofocus onto the face. And if your camera has eye detect and you're photographing people, use that, right? All right, so I hope that helps. Like I said, this one I just wanted to show quickly because when you're dealing with a color problem and a JPEG, honestly, I would go with something like this. Okay, if not pure black and white, then I would try and correct it with auto and then probably dial some of the saturation way down. Okay, I actually have another Luminar preset or template that I created, and that would work actually really well on this one. let me go into Luminar. A lot of the things that I do in Luminar, some of them you can do with Lightroom, but it just takes you longer. Some you cannot, like doing the texture overlays. I'm actually going to be creating a set of texture overlays that are all bokeh. So they'll be available in our shop on the website and hopefully on the marketplace on Skylum as well soon. I got to get out and shoot them first. So I'm going to shoot some specific images for bokeh that will make great overlays like the one I did on the first image. Right? All right, we're opening up Luminar. We'll give it a moment. All right, let's see. Cody, yes, the sessions are always saved to watch at a later date. If you go into our channel, you can see we have about 8 or so different live events from the last 2 months, and we're doing this every week, so you can watch those videos to your heart's content. We've got a full weekend of learning for you right there, right? Okay, where am I at here? I'm just waiting for Luminar. While I wait here, just a reminder, if you have not ever submitted images before, I'm thinking, Kelly said she's going to send me some light painting, or maybe tell me if you are she, or he. I don't know if you are a he or a she, Kelly. Cody, if you haven't submitted any images, please do so as well. You can use the form in the description below the video to send in your images. Up to 2 images may be submitted. All right, I've got Luminar opened. Let me get back over here. All right, can you see? You should be able to see my Luminar now. Why is it off the graph? There we go. Okay. So another one of the templates that I created that I had in mind for this one is called Antique Touch. So what I've done is I've created this sepia looking faded out sort of black and white look, and I think it will work well on this particular image. I'm also going to try the sharpening tools in here on the details to see if I can pick up any of that. Oh, I like that a lot. Okay, so see how that's correcting or counteracting a lot of those color problems. Now, if I just dial it down a little bit, we'll get more color back. Okay, so you can see how I can just dial that up or down. The other one that I thought might work well here is the Hollywood one I made, or black and white, and go with a pure black and white. This one is quite contrasty and punchy. Okay, that one looks good as well. So I'm going to stick with the Antique Touch. I like what that's done, right? And let's see if we can sharpen her up a bit, right? So in the details panel in Luminar, I'm going to zoom in here. Okay, so now you can see the issue with her eyes. Sharpen is one thing, but I find that if I go with small details, it does a really great job of picking up things that need to be sharper. This one might be a little bit too far out of focus, right? But I find that it does a really good job. If you have Topaz Denoise, sorry, that's a different product. Topaz Sharpen. If you could please share my review on Topaz Sharpen, you can get your images sharper, even ones like this where the focus is missed. Ideally, you want to get it right in camera, of course, but if you do happen to miss it and it's an image that you can't get again or recreate, give that a try and see if you can get Topaz Sharpen to fix your image, right? It's a fairly pricey program. It's about the same price as Luminar is, but it only sharpens, right? Likewise, their Topaz Denoise AI takes away the noise, like this one. Again, it's a dedicated product just for noise, right? So I think because of the, it's fairly noisy, but I've added some grain here. I've added a film grain to go with the sepia antique look, but I think it's sharpened her a little bit. Okay, let's do the before and after. You can definitely see that her lips are sharper. So I think it's done a really good job, right? Now, if it is sharpening overall too much, I don't want to sharpen everything and the background is sharp. So let's check our vignette, or let's check our mask on this one, and I'm going to mask it so that it is just on her. Okay, so I want to sharpen her. Yes, so I'm going to paint it on her as opposed to painting it off the background. Okay, so I'm going to paint it on. Oops, looks like I'm going to have to erase. Erase, erase, bigger brush. Erase, erase. I think it's just catching up with me. Okay, so see how I've now erased it from there, because I don't want to sharpen that curtain that's out of focus, and I don't want to sharpen this one either. So I would just go through and with a little more care of where I'm painting, make sure that I'm not sharpening the background, right? My computer is catching up to me. If you find that your program is running slow, make sure that you close everything else, because part of the reason why my computer is running slow today is because I have Lightroom and Luminar both opened. I also have YouTube opened, and I'm streaming live streams. So when I'm pushing my live video stream out, it actually takes a lot of memory from my computer. Right? If you are finding that your computer is slow or running out of memory, close the other apps that you're not using, close your email, close your browser, close everything else, and make sure that the photo editing program is the only thing that you have opened. Right? Make sure that you have enough RAM as well. I have 64 gigs, right? which is a lot, right? And I want to do the elephant today as well, but we may stop here and have a look at how this one comes out, right? I'm gonna hop back over to Lightroom. Okay, and let's start on the next one, and that one's gonna process in the background. Okay. Let me just show you what I did with this little elephant here. This is from Mansour. Again, this is a JPEG, but the JPEG here was well exposed and has a good color balance, so I didn't have to do a lot here, right? You can see the white balance was as shot, but what I'm going to do is just show you the before, right? So it's just a little bit sort of flat, even though this elephant is fairly contrasty, right? Let's see. So I did my usual tricks. I did the blacks and the whites. I punched up the shadows a little bit because I wanted to pick up a little more detail underneath this elephant here. Okay. And what I did was I used a radial filter, okay, to darken the area around the elephant. And then I'm going to add another one. And this time I'm going to make sure it's on the inside. And I'm going to add texture and clarity just to the top part of the elephant. Okay? So I really want to bring attention to his trunk and his face, because he's got so much character and wrinkles there that I want to make sure to bring that out. But again, I don't want to do that to the entire image. Okay? You can see the texture that I'm picking up here. Let me zoom in a little bit on the elephant. Okay? So you can see the circle. Let me turn it off. Watch the elephant's face. And you can see how I'm really picking up the clarity and the texture there. And I might want to bring up the shadows a little bit on his face too. Awesome. Okay, so see how that works to really bring the elephant out. Right. I also played around with some HSL in here. And what I did was I lowered the blues to bring out the sky. Okay, so see the difference in the sky on these HSL sliders. Okay, and that's in the luminance panel. Okay, I darkened the green and left the yellow. See, I could bring the yellow up to actually increase the contrast in the grass, right? So that the individual pieces of grass stand out more. You see that? And I even picked up some of the clouds and things in that sky. I'm going to add a little edge vignette. Just medium. And other than that, that's about all I would do to this elephant, because he's a handsome boy. Right. So once again, I've used a lot of radial filters to adjust things in certain areas. And we should be able to see this one. Not sure why it's not applying my edit. My poor Lightroom. My poor Lightroom. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. So I'll come back and show you the final image of the, looks like a dancer, like an Indian dancer. So I'll come back to show you that one before we head out. Are there any final questions that anybody has that is watching? Sharpen. Awesome. Take care, Kelly. And there's no more questions. Awesome. So just to recap what we've learned today, we talked about making an abstract image, adding some texture overlays. We did some tone control. A lot of what I do in editing is tone control so that the subject stands out. So again, whether that's darkening the background or lightening the subject, or a combination of both, and also blurring. Okay. Keep in mind, again, I showed you some of my new portrait templates, which will be available through the Skylum Marketplace soon. You can also get to them from digitalphotomentor.com/shop. So my Lightroom is not catching up. I think I'm going to have to give my computer a rest. It's hot. I'm hot. It's 30-some degrees in here. So until next time, remember, next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. That's 8 p.m. in New York. And morning time sometime over in New Zealand and Australia down under. Please remember to mark it in your calendars and come and join me live next week and ask your questions live in the chat. Take care. Until next time.